Racing games are fun and all, but once you've played one or two, you've basically seen them all. There are different types of course, but kart races, racing sims and arcade style races can only vary so much. That's where Onrush comes in. While the game still feels like an arcade racer moment to moment, its addition of wildly varied game types makes Onrush feel like something altogether new. But is it good? Let's take a look. At first, Onrush feels like a typical arcade-style racer, complete with intense speed, huge crashes, and massive airtime, and on a mechanical level the game feels fantastic. Controls feel tight and responsive, and it makes for a fast and frantic time, especially when you take the other racers and bots that act as ramming fodder into consideration. Bots in your arcade racer? It's more likely than you might think, especially since Onrush isn't really a racing game in the traditional sense. Despite driving fast cars around a track, you're never really racing in a literal sense. In fact, it's a bit more accurate to compare it to Overwatch, but with cars. No matter what game type you're playing, winning is about completing objectives as a team, not finishing first, and each vehicle type plays an integral role in either aiding your team or hindering your opponents. The variety of vehicles on offer is decent, and their skills are fun and unique ways of changing up the gameplay. The range of 8 vehicles across 4 size classes each feature their own active and passive abilities, from the Titan vehicles that specialize in shielding teammates and slowing down opponents, to the outlaw motorcycles that leave a draining trail behind them when they trigger their ultimate. These abilities are essential to completing your objective, which varies from game to game. The overdrive mode is as simple as gaining points by boosting. Boost more than your opponents, and you win. The countdown gives each team a time limit that replenishes with each racer to pass through the checkpoints, and the first team to hit 0 seconds loses. Lockdown acts as a type of mobile king of the hill mode where you have to keep more of your team in the capture zone than your opponents, and finally, Switch puts each racer on a motorbike and gives them 3 lives. Each crash respawns a racer on a heavier class of vehicle until one team runs out of lives completely. This is an approach to the arcade racing formula that I've never really seen before, and it's honestly refreshing to play a car game that isn't about finishing first. It's more about using your abilities to affect each team, and nothing affects either team more than using your Rush ultimate ability. No matter what game type you play or car you're driving, most of the time you'll be looking to trigger your Rush ultimate, an ability that almost always has the potential to turn the tide of a game. You gain your Rush meter in a variety of ways depending on your vehicle, encouraging you to vary your playstyle to match. For instance, if you're on a motorbike, you'll want to perform tricks mid-jump, or if you're in the Enforcer, then smashing fodder vehicles will build up your meter more quickly. No matter what you drive though, using a boost will gradually build up your Rush meter, and boosts can be gained simply by driving dangerously. Close calls, jumps, ramming opponents, they all build meter, and you'll do most of these almost passively. It's such a simple loop of meter building that I can recall various instances where I would be boosting for 90% of a race just because it's so easy to build boost by accident, and therefore it's quick to build up your Rush ability, even if you aren't quite adjusted to playing in certain styles. These Rush ultimates can accomplish various things, such as blinding opponents, gifting your car with ramming power, or even causing nearby allies to gain their boost even more quickly, which at the end of the day feeds back into the cycle of gaining Rush meter. It all comes back to making the game feel fast and rewarding, which, in the short term at least, it does. In terms of its actual gameplay, I have very few complaints to level at Onrush. Hitting and being hit by opponents and determining which car will come off better off in the process can be a little muddled, but for the most part playing Onrush is an absolute joy, but it's far from a perfect overall package. Loot box style unlocks and a lack of any compelling progression means that, besides the actual fun of playing the game, there's very little incentive to carry on playing. It makes Onrush a great game to pick up and play for half an hour at a time, but extended sessions just don't feel super rewarding in the long run. In addition to that, while the game is visually quite nice, it lacks a distinct personality of its own. While the game style makes me think Overwatch but with cars, the visual design of the game feels woefully generic. Between the forgettable characters, the by-the-numbers festival trappings of the game's so-called plot, and the boring punk dubstep hybrid soundtrack, there's very little to be excited about outside of the gameplay. On the bright side, I suppose that makes the loot box style unlocks less offensive since there's not really anything worth unlocking. The other issue is that there isn't a huge amount to keep Onrush interesting. The variety of vehicles is nice and there's a decent assortment of tracks made available as the single player content progresses, but much like Overwatch, the game seems content to deliver a fun and frantic multiplayer framework and leave it at that. Even the single player is really just multiplayer against bots. But if you just want to play against bots, they provide a fun, if repetitive, challenge. With all that said, Onrush is good. It's a refreshing take on the arcade racer genre, and the moment-to-moment gameplay is incredibly fun and responsive. Despite its lack of personality and incentive to keep playing, I would highly recommend checking the game out, even on a purely mechanical level. It is a lot of fun.